I am proud also that the Purdue community assisted Hidden Figures by reaching #1 at the box office by selling out multiple private screenings of the film. These screenings were also followed by programs which were designed to amplify the important role of women and underrepresented minorities in the STEM disciplines. Ms. Shetterly is also the founder of the Human Computing Project, which is a digital archive of the stories of the NASA African American human computers. Their work helped tip the balance in favor of the United States in World War II, the Cold War, and also the space program. She grew up in Hampton, Virginia, where she knew personally many of the women in Hidden Figures. She graduated from the University of Virginia, and she currently resides in Charlottesville, Virginia. She is also a 2014 recipient of the Alfred P. Salome Foundation Fellow. Please join me in giving a warm Purdue University welcome to Ms. Margot Lee Shetterly.
Thank you, Renee Thomas. Thank you, Greg Buzzard. Thank you to everyone who has been involved in bringing me here to Purdue. And thank you to everyone who has come here tonight and who has seen the movie and who has bought the book, because the reason why the book is #1 and the movie has been #1 is because of your interest and your belief that this story belongs to you too, which it does. So I just want to say thank you very much for that. It means a lot to me. It is wonderful for me to be here in the cradle of astronauts talking about this story. I've spent a lot of time learning about many of your extremely accomplished graduates. We claim them in Hampton, Virginia as well because of their role in Project Mercury, and I can tell you that it's not half a mile from my parents' house in Hampton to the Gus Grissom Bridge on Mercury Boulevard. So I hope that just as we claim those astronauts as a part of our history in Hampton, that hopefully you will feel a connection and claim these women as part of what Purdue has done for our country over the years. My book, Hidden Figures, tells the story of Dorothy Vaughn, Mary Jackson, Katherine Johnson, and Christine Darden, 4 Black women working as professional mathematicians at NASA Langley, and it follows their lives from the days of World War II through the moon landing. At a time when Blacks were legally segregated from whites in all aspects of life, from the schoolyard to the graveyard, when women of all backgrounds were unable to get credit in their own name or even serve on juries in many states, the women of Hidden Figures upend all of our perceptions of what it means to be Black, to be female, to be a scientist, and to be American. Dorothy Vaughn was a math teacher at the segregated Black high school in Farmville, Virginia, and many of you may have heard of Farmville. That was the site of the vice presidential debate in the past presidential election. When she traveled to Hampton, Virginia in 1943 to take a job as professional mathematician at the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics Langley Memorial Aeronautical Laboratory, which is the kernel of what would become NASA. She had to sit in the back of the bus to make that trip, but she would go on to become the first Black manager in what was then and still one of the world's most exclusive engineering and scientific organizations. In the 1950s, Mary Jackson had to apply for special permission just to walk through the doors after hours at all-white Hampton High School so that she could take advanced math classes as part of an engineering training program. She became NASA's first Black female engineer, and she very well may have been the first Black woman aeronautical engineer in the entire country. Katherine Johnson, who is 98 years old now, she was born in 1918. Statistically at birth, a Black baby girl born that year had a 2% chance of finishing high school, and she wasn't expected to live to see her 35th birthday. Catherine's from rural White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia, and she went on to calculate the trajectories for the orbital spaceflight of astronaut John Glenn, which is a moment that tipped the balance in favor of the United States in the space race with the Soviet Union. And Dr. Christine Darden was a student at an all-black junior high school in rural North Carolina with no science lab, only secondhand textbooks, when the Supreme Court passed the Brown versus Board of Education decision outlining racial segregation in our nation's public schools. 2 decades later, as a young aeronautical engineer at Langley, Dr. Darden wrote a computer program that set the industry standard for sonic boom minimization, and she went on to become NASA's leading expert on the topic. So we are here today to honor these women and also to discuss the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. And I really can't think of a better way to celebrate his legacy than to share with you tonight some of what I have learned researching the history of these extraordinary women. When we talk about the long drive to defeat racial discrimination in America, Dr. King is probably the first name that comes to mind. No one is more identified with the Black freedom movement, the push to bring liberty and justice and the American dream to all of our country's citizens. But today, let's step out of the shadow of Dr. King, the icon, and shed some light on some of the lesser known or even hidden aspects of this great leader. Dr. King had a transcendent sense of humanity. He was concerned, obviously, about the mobility and the liberty of Black people in this country, but not just Black people. He was also very interested in poor people and disenfranchised people of all backgrounds. He was an avid reader, a prolific writer, and someone whose interests went well beyond the mythic figure that we think we know when this time of year rolls around. But would you believe it if I told you that Martin Luther King Jr. was a Trekkie? That is right. Dr. King was a Star Trek fan. I'm sure everybody here is familiar with the television show Star Trek, hopefully the younger people too. Star Trek debuted on television in September 1966, showing a multinational, multiracial, mixed-gender crew aboard the Starship Enterprise on a peacekeeping and deep space exploration mission in the year 2266. Lieutenant Uhura, a Black woman played by actress Nichelle Nichols, served as the ship's communications officer. Even as the show gathered momentum during its first season, Nichols decided to tender her resignation to the show's creator, Gene Roddenberry, because she wanted to return to Broadway, which was really her first love as an actress. Roddenberry wanted to keep Nichols in the cast, so he refused her resignation, and he asked her to take the weekend to think it over. That particular weekend, she went to a celebrity civil rights fundraiser in Los Angeles. One of the event coordinators came up to her and let her know that her greatest fan was there in attendance and he was hoping to meet her. So she was expecting some awkward adolescent, but lo and behold, she found herself face to face with none other than the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. King never missed an episode of the show, and it was the only show that he and his wife Coretta allowed their children to watch. So, true story. Nichols thanked him for his praise, but she began to mention that she was thinking of leaving the show, and King stopped her cold. You cannot leave the show, he told her. We are there because you are there. Black people have been imagined in the future, he said to her. Furthermore, he told her, he had studied the Starfleet's command structure and he believed that it mirrored that of the US Air Force, making Uhura, a Black woman, the fourth in command of the ship. This is not a Black role. This is not a female role, he said to her. This is a unique role that brings to life what we are marching for, equality. And that spirit that Dr. King expressed to Mrs. Nichols that day was the same spirit that the women that I wrote about brought to their work and to their careers at Langley. They didn't want to be the Black mathematician or the woman mathematician. They wanted to be what John Glenn calls Katherine Johnson in the Hidden Figures movie, the smart one, the right person at the right time for the job at hand. Doing something that had never been done before, whether it was integrating a workplace or sending a man into space, wasn't a deterrent to these women. These were intrepid women of science who also saw themselves as agents of social change. Equality is what these women were marching for as well, though they marched not with their feet, but with their mathematical talent.